So we left off last class talking about President Roosevelt here, right, and his policies. I want to talk about how we organize for war here with number 2. There we go. And the key thing you have to know about the organization for the war was that this was a total war, and that the government was going to control.
You put an E after organizing for
a war. All right. So total war here. Government controls everything. Citizens are expected to help with the war effort. And so some of the things that they did as part of this total war process was, number 1, the government mobilized production. There we go. Some examples of this include there were massive military orders that were put in to manufacturers in the United States. And while it's a terrible thing, war, what did it do for the U.S.? The economy's going way up. Yeah, it pulls us out of the Depression, all right? It pulls us out of the Depression. We basically stopped production of non-essentials, so cars, automobiles, which I haven't read anything in history, but my faint sense of economics, and I could be totally wrong here because people did die in the war too, but you would think if they stopped production of cars that there's probably going to be a pretty demand for cars in the automobile after the war, right? Which is what we see in the 1950s with everybody trying to purchase a vehicle. All right, there's also wartime rationing. The supply of rubber was cut off when Japan overtook Malaya. All right? Yeah. No. We're still talking about mobilizing for production. Another result of the mobilizing effort was that full-time employment led to inflation. And so we see the Office of Price Administration developed. And their job is essentially to regulate prices. Labor unions increase in size and power. Women and African Americans enter the workforce en masse to help cover the need. Of course, we'll talk about the migration here too of blacks, right? That happened during World War I and into World War II as well, right? There's still some mobilization. We also have Rosie the Riveter with women, that kind of the we can do it, flexing, right? You guys remember her or no? She's pretty tough looking. Yeah. Some strikes led to the government taking over industry. There was the Smith-Connolly anti-strike law. Similar to World War I. Oh, let you guys catch up with that. Smith-Connolly anti-strike law. We see propaganda. People are encouraged to buy war bonds, support rationing, work harder than maybe they would have in the past. Although I always get a kick out of that. To me, if you're doing the job and you're an honest person, you're already working hard, right? We see posters and movies out, and there's a demonizing and a dehumanizing of the Japanese people. It's kind of a target, like the Hun was for the World War I. There's a lot going out there against the Japanese. Pretty important part here, Roosevelt decides he's going to try to work with businesses. Instead of just taking it over into complete militaristic or just a complete dictatorship, he decides that we are, after all, a capitalist country, and in order for a capitalist country and capitalism to work, businesses need to make money. Another part of the organizing for war included Executive Order 9066. Ms. Garb, do you remember what Executive Order 9066 did? Yeah, well, internment camps. All right. Yeah. Essentially, yes. Not much better, right? We set up internment camps, prison camps for the Japanese. Oh, yeah, you bet. Barbed wire, fences, poor food supplies. Hey, but you know what? It wasn't a massive execution, right, John? Oh. Hashtag patriot. Hashtag American do no wrong. All right. So these people were moved there for protection, mostly for fear of spying or aiding invasion. So they were there for protection. Yes, and maybe themselves too, to some degree. You could kind of sell it like that politically, but we all know what really was going on here. That's an R. Let me read out the whole thing. There's a Supreme Court case here that I have. It's Korematsu versus the U.S. This is a case that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually upheld that the U.S. was within their right to send people to these internment camps, and that it was an acceptable practice during wartime. Now, World War II, 1940s, correct? It's not until 1988. Oof, 1988 that the U.S. government finally says, you know what, our bad here. And they give a monetary sum to the families and the survivors of $20,000. Whoop-de-freaking-do, all right? It could be worse, right? What's that? I think it was to the families, if I remember correctly. Now, if they died or if they didn't make it, I think it went to survivors first and then families, I'm guessing. If I remember correctly. What's that? I think so. Now, if it was like a family of 5, did they all get 20,000? I don't remember the specifics. I think it was 20,000 to every survivor, but I'm not sure. I haven't read up on my 1988 Supreme Court or government rulings on giving it back yet. So I know it's in your textbook, but off the top of my head, John, you got me. Sorry, man. All right. Number 3 is the war in Europe. And in talking about the war in Europe, I'm also going to be talking about the war in Africa, the Mediterranean, and D-Day. All right, those 4 things we're going to get to. So if you want to add that there, Africa, Mediterranean, and D-Day, you can go ahead and do so. So let's talk about the strategy, the overall strategy that was in play with the Allies here. And remember, the AP exam in general doesn't ask a lot of military-style questions. They're not interested in battles. If you're into that kind of stuff, go on, get your PhD, and work for the History Channel. And I'd love to see it. No, I'm not being that facetious here. If that's really what you're passionate about, then that's a spot for you, okay? Because I know that's a great place to kind of share your knowledge. Strategy. The strategy was to take Africa, then go through Italy to set up a southern front. Russia, their job was to hold the eastern front. We wanted to create a massive western front to essentially kind of squeeze everything together. And D-Day, the invasion of Normandy, ends up being the war that ends all wars here. I think I told you guys about the guy who worked on our family farm, who was in D-Day, right? Drove the supply truck. You know, he went to a nursing home. He just died recently, passed away. He had dementia. But he went to the nursing home in 2004, and it wasn't until about 2002, 2003 that he really started to talk about the war. He didn't talk about it much, but he would talk about Normandy once in a while. And he said, "Oh, the blood." And you could just see he wasn't an emotional guy, but you could see that it was an emotional thing to think about for him. You know, one of my, I think I told you guys, my biggest regret is not talking to him more about it. But I think it's, if anybody here have grandparents who were in Vietnam, okay. Do you, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know if you've talked to your grandparents about it, they don't want to, right? And I know it's, as we lose World War II veterans and we start to lose Vietnam veterans here, in the next 15 to 20 years, we're going to be really upset that we don't talk to these people about their experiences. But at the end of the day, I don't think they really want to relive it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of the catch-22. You want to learn more about it, they don't want to share it, and you regret not talking to them about it, but at the end of the day, maybe that's what's best, that we don't know about it, that they don't want to, they feel guilty about it, and stir stuff up for them that really is just piquing our curiosity for no other reason than to just kind of be nosy as to what their experience was like. All right? Okay. The war in the Pacific. Includes big names here, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Priority for the Allies was to take out Germany first, and then focus on the Western, and then focus on which would be our Western Front, the Far Eastern Front for the Europeans, right? Then focusing on Asia after that. One of the things that we did island hopping, right? And there's some stories I think it would be great to read about this summer if you're a reader. I don't know if you guys are or not, but maybe at some point when you get older, just kind of mark this down. There are stories of people who were Japanese soldiers who weren't really sure that the war was over for a long time after the fact, right? And because our goal was to jump from island to island rather than try to take out all the islands at one time in a string, we attacked the islands that had the largest military outposts, all right, kind of cut the supply off. for the chain of islands that they reached to.
I thought it was, take the weaker ones, establish an air base, and then bomb the crap out of the stronger ones.
That would make more sense, wouldn't it, John?
That sounds like an American thing to do.
That's what an American thing to do. You're probably right. Air bases and the weaker ones, but the bottom line is getting those strong islands taken care of. Don't worry about all the weaker ones, right? Because if you say weaker ones, I think of, okay, so if there's island right here, island, and then a big island that kind of supplied all of these, right, on the chain. You're right. They probably took out maybe this island right here, set up the air base, and then just bombed the crap out of this one. But at the end of the day, they didn't worry about this island, this island, this island, this island, or this island, right? Not all the weaker ones.
Yeah.
The goal was to take out the big islands and then not worry about all the little P-dunk ones, all right? You see, this is what we're talking about. John here, man. History Channel. Good stuff, dude. All right. Island hopping included the firebombing in Tokyo. Get closer. They want to try to get closer and closer and closer to the mainland here, so they would be able to just firebomb in Tokyo and other cities. There's the Manhattan Project, which is a big part of this. Which, if you guys are familiar with this or not, you should be. It sets up what? Emily, do you remember what the Manhattan Project sets up? Danny, want to help her out? The atom bomb, right? Atomic nuclear weapons, right? Two of them end up going on here, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fat Man and Little Boy are the name of the bombs. Essentially, the goal here is we're going to take out a bunch. We're going to take out these two cities. The next on the radar was going to be Tokyo. And essentially, there's a couple things at play here. First one is, even though there's going to be a massive loss of Japanese casualty, of civilian casualties, we're going to, in the long run, probably save Japanese citizens, because if you remember Okinawa, they talk about fighting on the cliffs. People are going until they're so that they're going to fight to the death. They're not going to give up. They're not going to surrender. And so the number that was thrown around was 1 million American lives, essentially cannon fodder that would be needed in order to get Japan taken over. And that's just 1 million people that would probably die. No talking about how many troops would actually be needed to take over the island. And so there's a sacrifice there of those two cities, which is obviously terrible. It's also a bit of a warning to Russia that, remember, we were in kind of a hurry to get Japan taken care of after the European War, because we were afraid that Russia was going to regroup and be more active in China and have more claims in Asia than we wanted them to have. We wanted to stop the Reds. Okay, so that's it on the war. I want to talk about diplomacy next. Talk about the war aims here. Obviously, we want to work with Russia during the war. Russia is kind of asked to hold off Germany on the east until America and Britain can get the western stuff side taken care of and the southern invasion. We are what you would call hesitant friends with Russia during this war process. And the reason why they were hesitant friends is that there was a realization that communism would be a problem after the war. Remember, World War I was easier to get involved with because the Russian monarchy was taken over and they had actually already settled with Germany before we had really become active participants in the war. But fighting for democracy was something we were able to hang our hat on in World War I. It gets a little fuzzy with the communists in Russia and being on the same side as them during World War II. Almost like an enemy of my enemy is my friend type of a thing, right? There's also famous wartime conferences. Just going to go through them real quick here. There's the Casablanca Conference. Anybody ever seen the movie Casablanca? It's like made 1940s, I think, 1950s, somewhere. It's black and white. Oh, it's black and white, Mr. Russ. It must really suck. Anybody ever seen Young Frankenstein? Mel Brooks? Nobody? Wow, you guys are a tough crowd. Young Frankenstein is, Mel Brooks wrote Spaceballs. If you've ever seen that movie, it's really funny. Goofy stuff. Well, Young Frankenstein's kind of a spoof on Frankenstein, the movie. It's in black and white. I showed it to my sophomores. I used to teach in English when I was an English teacher because we finished up Frankenstein and we watched something fun. Oh, this movie's so good! And then about after the first day, you had those kids that were kind of pouting in the back of the room because 95% of the kids that thought it was going to be just a total drab were laughing. But some kids were so mad because they were wrong. The movie didn't suck. So they just did like, whatever. All right? Can't please everybody. Go ahead, Jack. The Casablanca Conference is basically set up to invade Italy. They talk about unconditional surrender here. And I think you're fast tracked to 5, if I remember my readings correctly. They go through all these. The Tehran Conference sets up the UN. Yalta, the big four meet to talk about splitting Germany into 4 pieces. The U.S., Great Britain, France, and Russia. And of course, the U.S. and Great Britain and France give Germany back to the German people. Russia keeps Eastern Germany. And kind of an extension of this, what I just talked about right there, is the Potsdam Conference, in which Germany, how to govern Germany is taken care of, as well as how to attack Japan. Yeah. It did, yeah. So it established how Germany was going to be set up, the government for Germany, and then the next thing was talking about how they're going to take out Japan. And that's where the rumblings about, well, we got to get to Japan before Russia can get really seriously involved here because we don't want to have them having too much power. All right. Post-war atmosphere. There is a new world order. Bam, bam, bam. You guys ever watch WCW? You know what? I'm just not even going to talk about stuff that I watch because obviously I'm out of the loop. I'm almost 30 right now, okay? You guys don't get it. No. You know what? There's a cultural divide here. I went into MTV. I did, however, stumble upon a really cool website. It's you can post videos online and watch them. It's called YouTube. Have you guys heard about that? Okay, good. It's not as good because I'm posting it on my YouTube channel right now, but I used to pull that with my current events kids, and they're like, "Oh yeah, YouTube, Mr. Russ, you're right." Especially the freshmen and sophomores, they were always fun to play around with. Yeah, Craig.
Isn't WCW the one before WWE? No. Oh.
They were in the same time. Monday Night Wars. WWF became WWE because they got sued by the World Wildlife Foundation. Yeah. No joke. No joke. No joke.
Wait, so you watched both of them?
Come on.
Oh, well, you told me you were the WWE.
I'm a WWE guy through and through. Don't get me wrong here, but I used to dabble a little bit. All right, so post-war atmosphere, we got the United Nations. The United Nations. America kind of feels like they're king of the world. They come out of World War II smelling like a rose here. They really don't have a whole lot of homeland issues, with the exception of course, Pearl Harbor. And there were some Japanese who got into the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Aleutian. Was it Aleutian Islands? Did I say Aleutian? Aleutian Islands. Sorry. Pardon my pronunciation error. Yes, but that was about it. Nothing really hurt there. There was also Russia. Russia takes over Eastern Germany. Promises to let them have free elections, but they don't, as far as we're concerned. And so World War III with Russia is almost imminent here after the war. We got to do this just for old time's sakes. Hiroshima and Nagasaki here. Atomic bombs. There's also a hashtag coming through from the president here to Russia. Hashtag, all right. Hashtag shots fired. It's the opening shot to the Cold War. It's a threat to the Russian people that, hey, we've got these nukes. We're not afraid to use them. We have racial and gender issues that return. The issue being inequality comes back to bite us, which I always find really fascinating, how whenever there's a time of real sincere need, we're able to say, you know what, inequality, let's just put those things aside, all right? And let's just let everybody work together. And then as soon as things cool off, we're back to, well, when you are a second-class citizen, and though you pretty much helped save this country, we really don't need you anymore. All right, come on. All right, you know.
They just have to have a fight one way or another going on all the time.
There we go. So not only will war help solve the population issue, Laura Lee, it'll also help to create equality in this country. So cathartic. All right. Economy. The economy of the U.S. and the world falters at first. There's a potential for a huge labor unrest coming out of here. There's a fear that the U.S. is going to return to the Depression. And so what we see after the war, essentially, we've got returning men from the war effort. What are we going to do with them? Industries drop output at first because they're not sure how to handle everything. The whole idea behind capitalism, though, is that eventually the ship gets righted with supply and demand, and things kind of even out.
What did businesses do, by the way?
They were unsure. They kind of dropped their output initially. So it dropped how much product they were making because they weren't.
In Germany, like they cut jobs, didn't they?
Yeah, that would be probably the outcome, right? If they cut output, they're probably not going to use many people working. There's massive inflation. There's also organized labor has more power.
And the war industries buildings are sold very cheaply to the private sector in hopes that things will kind of get taken care of as far as the manufacturing and things. All right?